Welcome to Cosmic Chosen. It's not a glitch. It's divine encryption. The systems can't read you anymore because you're no longer running on their outdated code. You've been updated spiritually, emotionally, energetically. You're unscannable, untrackable, unmistakably different. You see, God didn't send you into their lives just to uplift them. No, He sent you to reveal them. That's the twist they never saw coming. They thought you were a blessing to be consumed, someone to tolerate until they could use what you brought and discard the rest. But you weren't a guest in their story. You were the mirror they prayed would never arrive. And when they mishandled you, when they betrayed, mocked, or dismissed you, that mirror shattered. But not because it was weak, because it was time for the truth to cut through the illusion. You weren't there to fix them. You were there to expose the fracture they'd painted over with personality, performance, and pretense. And now, the blessing is gone, but the evidence of their failure remains. They mistook a divine assignment for a doormat. They failed a test they didn't know they were taking, because the real exam was never about how well they could impress others. It was about how they treated the one person God sent to upgrade their soul. Now they're left with an echo of a presence they cannot replicate, of peace they cannot manufacture, of access they no longer have. And you've disappeared from their radar. Even the system, friends, family, social circles, even algorithms, can't place you anymore. Because you're operating in divine stealth mode. Your frequency is unreadable, because you outgrew the realm where they once could touch you. So laugh a little, chosen one. They're still trying to download a version of you that no longer exists. Still pressing refresh, hoping to decode a soul that was never meant to be processed, only protected. Let's talk about it. Because the transformation wasn't revenge. It was revelation. And now you're proof that when God rewrites your script, even computers get confused. Instead of confronting themselves, they decided to shatter their mirror, which was you. They did more than simply treat you badly. In themselves, they were avoiding something. It wasn't loud or ostentatious, but you brought something strong into their lives. It was a presence that subtly mirrored everything that they were concealing. Their falsehoods felt exposed by your candor. Their games seemed infantile because of your sincerity. Their brutality seemed more colder because of your love. And they saw you as a danger rather than a benefit. You exposed them not because you assaulted them. You didn't need to speak. Your very presence served as a spiritual mirror. They also realized in their hearts that what they saw in your mirror wasn't you. They were the focus. Their envy, resentment, and insecurity. Now everything they had never faced was looking back at them. And without even trying, you were the one with the mirror. What then did they do? They attempted to break the mirror. They dissected you. They made fun of you. They made you seem less valuable. You made them feel as if they were useless, not because they really thought you were. You weren't poisonous. You weren't demanding. You weren't too theatrical. You were just genuine. They were alarmed by it since anything that is bogus is exposed by reality. They had no idea how to sit in your company without feeling like hypocrites. In order to avoid having to see themselves so plainly, they decided to take the simpler option and break the mirror. The twist is that they did more than just smash a mirror. The one individual who may have aided in their evolution was cut off from them. Someone who really saw their potential despite all of that harm. Someone who continued to think they were excellent. Someone who was sent to assist people develop rather than to pass judgment. Now all that remains of them are the shards of their own mirror, strewn all over the place, piercing and merciless. You were never too much. You were too right. And it wasn't simply pain to lose you. They are no longer even able to look at themselves the same way. Unaware that you were the mastermind behind their breakthrough, they mocked the blueprint. They didn't know who they were up against. You didn't enter their lives only to gain acceptance or likeness. You had answers. You arrived with plans for them to advance cognitively, emotionally, and even spiritually. However, they were too conceited to see it. While you were the strategy, they mistakenly believed you were simply another traveler. You had wisdom that may have spared them years of suffering. Your own survival had given you knowledge. They didn't merit your forbearance. But they missed the whole task since you didn't brag or dress it up. They were unable to identify heavenly favor unless it was accompanied with a price tag, a celebrity following, or a title. Thus, they disregarded the one who was sent to convey their breakthrough. They didn't want the connection that needed humility, but they did want results. Additionally, they tossed away the present since it wasn't wrapped in the desired manner. Being their assistant was never intended for you. What they were praying for was designed by you. Their foundation had fissures that you could see. You attempted to assist them in rebuilding. They didn't even beg for the bits of your light that you offered them. You offered them guidance they were unaware they needed. When they offered you turmoil, you provided care. Additionally, they treated you like background noise in their tale rather than showing gratitude. They're trapped now. They lost contact with the person who held their spiritual blueprint, not because you cursed them or wished them luck. They never wanted your knowledge, but they did want your love, your enthusiasm, and your assistance. And now they are being completely consumed with the same issues that you might have resolved in a single discussion. They chuckled at your advice. They made fun of your viewpoint. They are now left to rebuild on demolished land and wonder why nothing endures. Playing little wasn't why you were there. The architect was you. They also made a complete mess of the design. You were the assignment, even if they believed you to be a servant. You weren't there to amuse them, stroke their pride, or play along with their drama. The real task was you. God sent you as a test in human form, a spiritual checkpoint. They were expected to respect your presence, acknowledge your worth, and develop as a result of the relationship. However, they were a complete failure, not because you were insufficient, but rather because they were too wounded, too blind, and too arrogant to see what was there in front of them. They believed they were in charge, but a greater force was keeping an eye on them. They had to decide whether to change or reveal themselves because of you. Rather, they decided to treat you badly. They believed they were just taking advantage of your generosity, gaslighting you, playing you, or showing you contempt. However, they were unaware that they were manipulating their own fate. The true test was how they treated you. It didn't matter whether you were flawless. It concerned their treatment of a person sent to improve their quality of life. Decoration wasn't why you were there. You were a result of divine intervention. They may either accept the task and level up, or they could turn it down and remain in cycles. They made a poor decision. They had access to a person who could have been able to assist them become better versions of themselves. However, they were too preoccupied with attempting to undermine your light, duplicating you, or competing with you. They're perplexed now that you're gone, wondering why things seem strange, why doors are shutting, why things are more difficult, and why they feel spiritually dry. The task departed, that's why. You weren't only one part of their narrative. The pivotal moment was you. However, they failed to read the indications. The exam was not taken seriously by them. And suddenly, everything that they believed they could control is collapsing. It wasn't karma. The expiration was beautiful. You no longer have the elegance that accompanied you. They are now dealing with the fallout from failing an assignment they were unaware they were taking. The last bridge before the wilderness was you. By the time you arrived, they had already begun to come apart. They were not as cohesive as they seemed. They were losing their spirituality, emotions, and minds behind the facade of pride, artificial grins, and diversions. Instead of coming to their aid like a hero, you brought about a miraculous stop in the midst of the mayhem. Before everything they were trying to avoid caught up with them, you were the final solid link. And they laughed as they torched the bridge rather than taking a humble step forward. They thought you were weak because of your kindness. They believed they were in control because of your allegiance. They thought you would be there all the time. Never stop forgiving. Always answer the phone. They were unaware that you were under no obligation to remain. You were allowed to remain. And that elegance lifted when they pushed you too much, from their lives as well as from yours, because it was more than simply you assisting them on the bridge. They were supposed to learn from your affection for them. They're now traversing a wilderness that they made themselves. It doesn't seem right, regardless of who they turn to, and it's dry, perplexing, and alienating. They have to cope with the fallout. Since the blessing they prayed for you was already granted, they are unable to pray away, and they turned it down. They couldn't see beyond their own dysfunction, not because you weren't enough. The final reminder that they may yet be redeemed was you. When even they couldn't see the good in them, the last person did. The last opportunity to do things right before they started isolating themselves. They are now surrounded with noise, but they lack substance. Lost in draining relationships, living in habits that impede their development. And the lack of you is more noticeable than they anticipated, whether they acknowledge it or not. They ignited the match, and you were the bridge. They're roaming now, and while you were still within reach, the wilderness's quiet was shouting what their pride would not listen to. They exchanged royalty for relevance, and now counterfeits are all around them. Something unusual was in your possession. Spiritual kingship, not simply love and loyalty. You moved with intelligence, honesty, and a calm power that proved itself without having to do anything. You didn't plead for attention. You didn't participate. You just were. And in a noisy environment, it alone made you stand out. But they decided to pursue relevance, likes over devotion, praise over alignment, and popularity over purpose, instead of respecting what they had in you. The inner labor your presence needed was something they didn't want to perform. People are forced to face their phony parts when they are with someone like you. It highlights the aspects they have been concealing behind charm, filters, and meaningless approval. They weren't prepared, and you stood for depth, development, and responsibility. They thus made a decision. They exchanged the holy for the dazzling. They substituted something palatable for something holy. They are now suffering the consequences of their decision. Counterfeit goods. People who don't love them, but just utilize them, are all around them. Those who co-sign their dysfunction instead of correcting them. Individuals who arrive when it's convenient rather than when it matters. They believed they were becoming more socially advanced, but they were really becoming less spiritually advanced, because following phony pals or passing attention cannot replace what they lost in you. The real one was you. The one who pushed them to do more than merely shine. The one who believed in their recovery despite seeing through their facade. But it was not what they wanted. The crowd was what they desired. The audience is now cheering them on as they destroy themselves, energizing them as they lose themselves. It's more than simply karma. Divine irony, that is. They may have been accompanied by royalty, which is heaven telling them, this is what you wanted. Now live in it. Someone who has been selected, cultivated, and grounded in reality. However, they discarded it in favor of noise that vanishes as soon as the performance ends. They are now in a crowded space, yet they are spiritually impoverished. Not visible, but surrounded. Not heard, but loud. Additionally, the quiet of your absence is more audible than any cheer they attempted to raise. Their wounds are screaming now because you were their unacknowledged healer. What you were really accomplishing for them was unknown to them. You weren't just present. You were more than simply a sister, friend, companion, or source of support. You were a silent healer who worked on planes they couldn't even explain with words. Not only did your energy soothe them, it also corrected them. You kept quiet about it. Your presence alone brought order to their disarray. You didn't push or preach. You eased their rage. You calmed their nerves. Without using words, you reminded them what it's like to be at ease. And they took it tranquilly for granted, as if it were commonplace and interchangeable. You were putting spiritual salve on wounds they were unaware were open, such as ego wounds, trust difficulties, identity crises, childhood scars, and deep, buried fractures they never had the guts to acknowledge, much less face. However, your perseverance and enthusiasm were what made the difference for them, and they attacked it rather than valuing it. They made fun of the medication. Since true healing necessitates surrender, they injured the hand that was keeping them together. Furthermore, they were unprepared for such a reality. I can't stand the stillness now that you're gone. And it goes beyond just not returning their calls. The reason for this is because their inner world is noisy. All of the wounds you were discreetly caring for are now wailing, bleeding, and cries for care that they are unable to provide. They are free to party, flirt, browse, consume alcohol, or divert their attention. Distractions don't matter to that internal bleeding. However, it seeks the return of the true healer, the person who opted to remain despite seeing the worst in them, the person who gave them the confidence to be themselves rather than merely act. However, divine medicine does not plead for acceptance. You went out. You took the healing with you. They are now trapped with unhealing scars, agony that won't go away, and a soul that feels all you put it back and finally realizes what your presence was doing. They sense that inward scream. That is the reverberation of losing the one person who handled their harm with respect. While you were bleeding, they laughed. Now, as you are rising, they cry. They found pleasure in seeing you suffer. They had a deranged feeling of control because of your weakness. They seemed more powerful the more you shattered. They wore your suffering like a medal they didn't deserve, made jokes out of your misery, and laughed behind your back. They were unaware that every tear you shed was a seed sown in what they believed would be your grave. However, God doesn't bury those who are chosen. He conceals them. He gives them water. When the time reveals the truth, He then elevates them. They saw your quiet as a sign of failure. They believed your narrative ended with your pain. They failed to see that you weren't dying in the dark. Rather, you were bleeding on the battlefield. You were being reinforced, honed, and tested. They were shaping you into something that could not be stopped by every betrayal, derisive chuckle, and chilly shoulder. You outgrew it rather than just surviving it. And now they murmur your name in some way in every place they enter. A win, a face, a remark, or a song. They can't get away from you now that you're in the environment. The absurd thing is that they still believe they would win. They continued to believe that they could control, defame, and go on while you remained damaged. Now, however, their sadness is public and their tears are private. Your ascent speaks louder than retaliation ever could, not because you're attempting to prove anything. This change wasn't forced by you. You turned into it. And now they sit in chambers that honor individuals like you, quietly wallowing in the knowledge that they were able to get it and misused it. That is the justice of God. When God twists the script, that is what occurs. Not because you retaliated, but because you recovered, the power dynamic changed. You changed. In solitude, you grew. Their laughter has now changed to inexplicable weeping. Your victories sting a bit more. Each glow-up serves as a reminder that they were laughing when they lost something valuable. You rose with grandeur after bleeding with grace. They can't even get to you now, even if they wanted to control you. Their love language was control, but it wasn't a healthy one. Partnership was not what they desired. They want ownership. They believed they could keep you circling them if they could manage your feelings, your self-assurance, and your access to the truth. They thought you would shrink the more they wounded you, so they used manipulation as a leash. Your grace is misinterpreted by them as weakness. They took your forgiveness as consent. In actuality, however, you were never under their control. You were completely above the game. You just weren't aware of it yet. They were afraid of your potential, so they sought to keep you tiny. They knew they wouldn't matter if you ever took full use of your authority. They attempted to undermine your brightness. Guilt here, criticism there, and covert sabotage when you become too brilliant. They believed they would have the upper hand if they kept you off balance. However, they overlooked a crucial detail. Fear is not a negotiation strategy for divine favor. To be handled is not why you were sent. You were directed to enlarge. And the collapse wasn't yours when you eventually left. They owned it. They are now forced to observe from a distance. And they are haunted by more than simply your achievement. You are free. You are now untouchable. You've outgrown the version of yourself they had access to, not because you're concealing. They are unable to control you tranquilly. They can't make you doubt yourself. Since you are no longer a puppet in a play for which you did not audition, they are unable to manipulate you. You don't need retribution. The conclusion is your growth. It's not that you departed that enrages them the most. They lost access to something that they will never be able to find again. Someone who advocated for shared authority. You had no intention of controlling them. With them, you were attempting to construct. However, their obsession with maintaining their position at the top caused them to fall under all they had previously controlled. They no longer hold, reach, or speak in your reality. They ended up with nothing but remorse after exchanging supremacy for power. They were rebelling against God, not against you. They failed to recognize your true self. They saw you as simply another human being, possibly a good one, but ultimately disposable and managed. They didn't understand that you weren't like the others. You were a live communication from above, a heavenly appointment. They had the opportunity to alter their direction and respect what was handed to them, with every sense they possessed and every caution that was uttered in the silence. However, they blocked it. They suppressed every inner voice telling them to treat you differently, disregarded every uncomfortable sensation, and ignored every gentle prod. They rebelled against more than just you. It was a disobedience to God's design. It was like a spiritual alarm going off when you enter their lives, demanding truth, progress, and realignment. However, they dug their heels in and resisted the call instead. The message was too unpleasant. Therefore, they resisted the messenger. They saw divine correction as an insult to themselves. They are now coping with more than simply remorse. Correction is what they're dealing with. This has nothing to do with punishment. It has to do with equilibrium. The goal is to straighten what is crooked by breaking it. You weren't only a victim of their lack of knowledge. The checkpoint they wouldn't go through was you. Furthermore, their current repercussions aren't only karma. It's the restoration of heavenly order. The surface is the shame they experience. There's more to it than that. Spiritual discipline is the kind that makes one face decisions that were made against the will of a higher power. They didn't know the screenplay was already written in the stars, but they believed they could change the narrative by ignoring you. This is a biblical realignment. It's the age-old dance between divine justice and free choice. They disregarded the solemn warning that you were. You were never simply someone in their lives, as shown by their whole existence. You served as the mirror, the exam, and the necessary correction that they were unable to accept. And since you weren't just a person to be abused, the catastrophe they're drowning in won't stop until they admit that. You were God's message, and they decided to revolt. They want the advantages, but not the honor. They claimed all you provided them as their own. Your time, your affection, your devotion, and your energy, all without ever weighing the price to you. They piled their plates full, treating your heart like an all-you-can-eat buffet, and they never once showed appreciation or respect for you in return. You expected nothing less than reciprocal honor. You gave it your all, and you showed up completely. However, they were unable to meet you there. Instead, they assumed your generosity was limitless and their disrespect was unimportant, treating it like an entitlement. They were unaware that the basis of all relationships is genuine honor. Even the greatest benefit becomes poisonous without it. They refuse to return the fundamental dignity that underpins the warmth, support, and light that come from your presence, even if they desired those advantages. They ate at your table as if they had never bothered to clean their dishes or wash their hands. They turned what ought to have been a communal feast into a one-sided consumption by taking for granted what was holy. However, God may change the course of events in a manner that no one can ignore. Those who used to eat at your table are now seated by themselves at empty ones. They wonder why nothing can satisfy their inner emptiness and look in all the wrong places for it. They experience spiritual starving rather than hunger. Starvation for the same respect and honor they refuse to accept. No number of goods, diversions, or fleeting relationships can make up for what they've destroyed by undervaluing the gift you were. They believed they could have everything. The gain without appreciation, the advantage without accountability. However, it is not how life or divine justice operate. Draining without honoring causes the well to finally run empty. They are suddenly confronted with a reality they attempted to ignore as they sat at those vacant tables. You were a gift that should be treasured rather than used up. Their current hunger is a reflection of their own disdain, an emptiness brought on by the loss of anything really valuable. They referred to you as insane, but now they quote your wisdom. Your reality was too much for them to take. You were too honest, too unvarnished, and too progressive. Your voice was unwanted and disturbing, like an alarm bell clanging in a peaceful room. To quiet the aspects of you that bother them, they labeled you insane, rolled their eyes, and murmured behind your back. Their cozy delusions were threatened by your cautions and observations. So, rather than confronting what you were attempting to expose, they shoved you away. But whether or not people are prepared for it, truth always finds a way to surface. The very phrases they made fun of you are now being used all over the place, influencing discussions, spurring change, and confronting the general public. Books, sermons, and podcasts are all repeating your knowledge as if it were fresh and deep, as if they had never heard it before. Really, it's a cosmic joke. Even the voices who laughed now mimic your tone because they realize in their hearts that you were correct. However, they are unable to get rid of the inside pain, the nagging sensation people have after hearing those facts and realizing how they were formerly disregarded or mocked. We call it conviction. The unspoken pain of knowing they lost the opportunity to hear you out, grow with you, and learn. Furthermore, that inner voice cannot be silenced by any amount of faking or deleting the past. It serves as a reminder that your comments were not the only thing they lost. They missed the opportunity to walk in your knowledge. Indeed, they labeled you insane, but they were more afraid of the clarity you provided. Furthermore, their silence speaks louder than any apology ever could as they now repeat your advice without giving you credit. The price of ignoring the person who foresaw the future before it came was the pain they bear. God made you the best-selling author despite their attempts to change your story. They put a lot of effort into damaging your reputation by depicting you in unflattering ways, distorting your motives, fabricating tales, and attempting to conceal the truth behind a mountain of falsehoods. Every rumor and defamatory murmur was an effort to manipulate the story and change your account to suit their interests. They wanted everyone to think the worst about you, that you were violent, unpredictable, or damaged. They failed to see, however, that your tale was not theirs to alter. They were blind to the fact that your legacy was already inscribed somewhere beyond rumors and falsehoods. Your book was certain to be a bestseller. Heaven had already sealed it, because of your tenacity, honesty, and unwavering spirit, not because of drama or controversy. The person who really counts never misinterpreted you, even if you may have been misrepresented to the outside world. Your heart was known to God. Your mission was known to God. And the ink that would not smear was that holy insight. As time goes on, the truth emerges like a beacon piercing the mists. The falsehoods they propagate begin to deteriorate and don't hold up over time. Like poor paint fading off a wall that used to be vibrant, people start to recognize the real you and see through the distortions. The version they made a concerted effort to remove. It's more than merely surviving in your tale. It's booming, becoming louder, and more motivating every day. Their attempts to change your tale have had a disastrous outcome. They have given the world a cause to read more, listen more, and comprehend the power of your silence rather than burying you. You didn't just escape their assaults. You outlived them. Because it is proof that truth triumphs over falsehoods, your story is now the one that everyone wants to hear. They mocked your faith and are now wishing for a miracle. They dismissed you easily because they thought your religion was a joke, something cutesy or innocent. Their skepticism easily targeted your faith, your silent prayers, and the optimism you held on to. They mocked your spiritual power, seeing it as a sign that you were disconnected from reality and a weakness. However, religion is not a performance or a ploy. They never comprehended the power. They are now in dire need of it. That same faith you exemplified became their final hope when everything went apart and their world broke. They resorted to the same God you unwaveringly believed in times of terror and distress. Ironically, those who laughed at your prayers are now the ones murmuring their own in the hopes of a miracle they once derided. However, the quiet they experience is not a result of absence or distance. That's the sound of favor that only fidelity can provide. They never understood that receiving favors involves more than simply chance or selection. It must be gained by persistent faith, perseverance in the face of adversity, and faith in the face of rejection. Your religion served as more than a protection. It served as a beacon to help you navigate through storms, something they couldn't borrow or fabricate. As they reach out in desperation, they discover that spiritual connection is not something that can be called upon instantly. Since they know what they lost, their current prayers are laced with remorse. Not only were you there, but you were also driven and shielded by your steadfast faith. You weren't helpless. They never realized how powerful you were. They are now forced to question why the God you introduced them to is unresponsive to their prayers. Favor goes to those who remain loyal even when no one is looking, not because he won't. Losing you was the turning point, even if they believed it was just a moment. They saw your departure as a passing inconvenience that could be resolved with a simple explanation or apology. They believed it was a phase, a pride-driven or frustration-driven response, and that it would go away with enough time. They totally overlooked the fact that a chosen one's departure is never a brief moment. These exits are recorded by the cosmos as holy occurrences rather than random errors. It wasn't simply a door shutting when you left. The spiritual ledger was sealed up for a whole chapter. They didn't understand that something far greater than themselves was ignited by your departure. They were a part of a heavenly mission that ended, but they didn't deserve to preserve it. Something changed in the energy. The chance was lost. Additionally, the area you occupied didn't remain vacant. It became a quiet judgment, an unavoidable spiritual judgment. This is not a straightforward season that will improve with work or time. It's a pivotal moment that changed their whole course. For a short while, they believed they had lost you, but in truth, they had lost the cornerstone that supported their whole universe. They are now forced to deal with the fallout from that loss and attempt to find their way without the blessing they previously took for granted. They are unaware that a spiritual line was being drawn the instant you departed. It was neither a choice nor a whim. It was the universe's way of telling us that certain doors don't just open again after being closed by a selected soul. They believed it to be a moment. However, that was the turning moment for both you and them. They now have to bear the consequences of that irrevocable change in the vast scheme of things. Some souls arrive by divine plan rather than by chance, bringing with them benefits so great that they change the destiny of others. They weren't prepared to hear the truth, but you were given as a gift, an unacknowledged light in their darkest moments, and a healer in their quiet struggles. However, they abused you, disregarded your value, and attempted to change your narrative rather than welcome you with dignity. Here's the indisputable reality, however, that losing you was never a short-term setback for them. Their route was permanently altered by a cosmic reckoning that caused a seismic upheaval. They had the opportunity to develop, change, and embrace something holy, but they choose to reject it. They starved their own souls of respect while feasting on your energies. They mocked your faith, but now they are fervently hoping for a miracle that you managed to hold in your hands. Their effort to change your story only served to highlight your genuine legacy. A bestseller written by God that cannot be tarnished by people. They end up losing what they thought was their win. Now, their suffering is neither accidental or arbitrary. It is the inevitable result of turning away a gift that is too pure for them to comprehend. This has nothing to do with punishment or retaliation. It is the indisputable force of divine justice at work, subtly but resolutely re-establishing truth and equilibrium in ways that are impossible for man to reverse. You are not a victim of their errors. You are the epitome of fortitude, faith, and an unwavering spirit. Your leaving signifies freedom rather than loss, a fresh start rather than a conclusion. The world witnesses the indisputable fact that blessings mishandled will always result in karma in action and loss as they sit in the stillness they have created for themselves, struggling with emptiness and sorrow. Their biggest loss was that they can never completely understand how it shapes lives and destiny, reverberating well beyond moments. You were never simply a person in their lives, so keep your head up. Their world will never be the same again because of you, the blessing they neglected, the healer they disregarded, and the truth they resisted. Don't keep it to yourself if this message spoke to you. If you can sense the strength of your own narrative and the weight of these facts, press the subscribe button to become a part of a community that values unvarnished, unadulterated facts. To support more potent material that talks to your spirit directly, like this video, please leave a remark below. Talk about your experiences, triumphs, or even setbacks. Here, your voice counts. Additionally, if you know someone who should hear this,